Yes people, I hope you're all doing well. I'm back with another video today and we're going to break down my latest release, Out My Head, which is out now on Groove Selects Record. So follow the link below, grab your copy and stream it on whatever streaming platforms you use. So let's get inside Ableton and see how I made this one.
Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop.
Okay, so we're inside Ableton. This is a project, and as always, I do a bit of a background on how the project came about. So this one was made about a year ago now, I believe, and it was my first attempt to really a proper edit. Obviously, if you haven't recognized the sample already, the edit is Kylie Minogue, Get Out My Head. And I really wanted to try and put my own spin on this edit, make it unique, because it's obviously a vocal that's been done before and something that's been heavily sampled in the past anyway. So this one was a real challenge for me because I naturally struggle to make edits. I find it quite restrictive from a creativity point of view, having to use someone else's work and put my own spin on it. Luckily that skill's developed over time, but when I made this around a year ago, I did really struggle with it. So what I'll just do is I will just play from the break up until the drop as per usual, because if you haven't heard it, you'll just get a vibe for the track. There you go, you get a rough idea for kind of the vibe that I was going for the track. So, as per usual, we're going to work our way through the track, go from the bass down to low ends, and go through synths. Everything that's in the track, we're going to break it down. So, let's start with the low end as usual. So, let's just play the low end. Very simple, very effective. And this is where the creativity of trying to put your unique spin on a well-known sample really comes into play. So if you haven't figured it out already, this bassline melody is the exact same of the bassline melody or the organ melody in the original track by Kylie Minogue. Now I found that out with the melody by searching the key, and then I just searched in Google Kylie Minogue Out My Head melody. And then there's a bunch of websites that come up with that melody because it's such a well-known song. So if you're trying to make an edit, always worth doing to see if you can find the melody. If not, you just have to try and replicate it as close as you can. And then what I'd done for the bass was I wanted something to play the same melody, but almost have the same sort of sound, almost have that organ type sound to it. So how I achieved that was using a preset in Subboom Bass 2 as per usual, called Bass FM01 Sub. Sorry to butt in halfway through the video, but I just wanted to advertise my brand new website, brendanjamesmusic.com. So you can head to the link in the description of this video and go there. I'm offering now one-to-one tuition, mixdowns and masters, and in the coming few months there will be sample packs on there, and the next track from scratch series will all be on there. So please just check it out and let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you're going to use those services. If you're having struggle with the website, just drop me an email, which is on the website, or drop me a message on Instagram. So this is a really good preset. It's got a nice fat low end to it, and it's got that sort of top layer almost like an organ, but it's a bit deeper and a bit darker, which works perfectly for what I was trying to go for. And then if we look at the processing, I've kept this really, really simple. We have an EQ, we have sidechain, I've put it in mono. We then have some saturation on it. And another EQ just with a bell around the 100. This is probably just making the room for the kick to come through. And then if we have a look at the kick, pretty standard kind of 909 sound. As I always say in all my videos, you want a nice, good kick to start with. It's almost the foundation of your track. So there's no point putting loads of processing on your kick channel. You're just better off finding a good kick sample to start with. So as you can see here, all I've done, EQ, another EQ, just knocking around with the mid and the high range, sort of helping it create that deeper effect by taking away some of the highs and the mids. Some saturation to give it some lift. We are then using the sculptor preset, which is in neutron free, and this is effectively a dynamic EQ preset. So if I just press play, you can see it's just knocking away that sort of mid range and just dynamically dipping the high end as well. And then just another EQ on there just to help really shape the kick so it gels perfectly with the bass. So then you get this effect. And all we have processing wise on the bus is FabFilter Saturn, which is some saturation, just sending both the bass and the kick through the saturation to help gel those frequencies together. So really, really simple with the low end, but that is what I love. And I emphasize with all of these videos and in my one-to-ones lessons is that simplicity is usually just the best way forward to create an effective track. The only other thing we've got in this bass group is reverse bass, which I've just resampled from the bass and then reversed it. So then you get that effect. So let's get down to the drums now and can have a look at that. Now, I really wanted to emphasize the original melody of the track. So I haven't added much groove with my drums. So when I press play, you'll notice they're pretty straightforward and on the grid. There's not much groove or kind of interesting variation going on within the hats. So as you can tell, really, really simple, really, really straight, and just you've got the clap every other beat, and then you've got the hi-hat sort of landing on that off beat. And like I said, this is just to emphasize the original melody. Didn't want too much distracting away from that melody and the vocal chop, which I'll get to later. So let's have a look at the clap. So I've got two samples on top of each other here. And then I'm using Fresh Air by Slate Digital, I believe. Driving the mid-range, so I'm just pushing the mid-range. You can effectively do the same sort of thing with an EQ if you don't have this plugin, but it is free. We then have the effect rack using Decapitator. This is adding some distortion and some saturation, and using the dark and bright feature, I'm then able just to shape the sound how I want to. If you don't know how this tone works, it effectively dips the high end down when you put it onto the dark setting, creating a darker feeling, or if you want it brighter, it almost pushes the high end out of the sound, giving it a brighter effect. I then have this SSL drum strip with the snare rescue preset. This is doing some more EQing, especially within the sort of low end here, as you can see, and it is doing some transient shaping and compression, so it's really helping the transient of this clap pop through. If I just turn this off, obviously a different in gain there because I haven't gain staged within the plugin, but it's really just helping that clap snap through the mix. Last thing on the chain is a PS2 to X, which you would have seen if you've watched any of my other videos, and this is just adding some width to the clap. Then if we jump down into the hats, we have a 808 hat, which is from Ableton's Cool Kit. Nothing fancy going on here, just literally a FabFilter EQ. We then have an open hat, which is a sample. It's just in the 606 kit, which sounds like this. almost like a gated, closed 808 open hi-hat. Stereo Savage, pushing it wider in the mix. EQ, so nothing too much going on with the processing. We have this top loop, which I've added some saturation and some sidechain and so a stereo width plugin. There's also parts of this top loop where you have this effect, which is in this loop itself. I haven't created this. All I've just done is cut that bit out and put it where I wanted to within my groove instead of using it within the top loop as it normally is. Hat 2. Another top loop. It's got a nice phased 16th hat in the background, and all I'm doing is just EQ and sidechain. Inside the clip, I haven't even done anything either. Then we have another hi-hat as a layer. This is much like a 606 kind of sound with no processing on. Another hi-hat layer. This one does have some groove hits in there, as you can see there and there, but very subtle. And then we have this shaker layer, which is on the offbeat, but this is helping add some sort of rough texture to the hi-hat groove. Currently, if we turn this off, all the hi-hats we've got are very clean. They almost sound like 808 drums and 606 hi-hats. Sounds nice, but it sounds very, very clean. Now with this shaker loop, it's almost sitting slightly underneath everything and just adding almost like a vinyl texture layer to the hi-hat. And you can just hear how that's subtly sat underneath it. You're probably only going to notice this if you've got headphones on. And then the other two parts to the hat groove we have is this 808 open hat and this 606 gated hat. These are stock Ableton as well, so everyone has access to them. And then these two call and response between each other, so they sound really nice. And then that is the whole of the drums. And with our lows. So far, extremely simple, but like I said, when you're making edits, you almost want to keep it as simple as possible so you can throw in as much of the original edit as possible. So for instance, for this track, we've obviously got the bassline melody. The bass sample itself sounds similar to an organ, not the exact same, but along the similar sort of lines. And then we've got the vocal in there as well. So that's probably about as much as I could get away with this edit with regards to throwing it back to the original, because that was pretty much all the original had as well, was some drums, vocals and bass. But if you had a more complex edit that you was working with maybe more synths, more pads, maybe like a piano riff, you could then try fitting these things in there. So by keeping it simple, it allows more freedom to put in more elements of the original and put your unique spin on them. So if we move on down, then we have the percussion, which is just glitchy sort of textural percussion. There's not actually many loops going on in here, especially compared to some of my more recent stuff, but they're all playing off each other really nicely. So let's just listen to what it sounds like as a group. So it's got a nice groove there, but it's also got that random element as well, which is what you want if you're trying to create these glitchy textural percussions. You want it to sound a bit random and a bit modulated, but it still needs to have a groove there because this is still dance music at the end of the day. If we have a look at this perk group here, this is coming from a drum rack with all my favorite sort of glitch perk hits that I've collected from different sample packs, which I'd recommend everyone to do if they haven't done already, because it just means you can save it to your Ableton template and have them all at your disposal as soon as you open up your project. But if we just have a listen to this loop, this is where a lot of the random elements are coming from. So I probably added this in last. because there's not much call and response going on between any of these sounds or any groove as such. So this can be a good technique to add, is once you've built a groove, you can then add something like this and just place a few sounds in randomly where you think it suits your groove. And that's how you can start to create these random elements within these textural glitchy percussion loops. So then we have a look at loop 1, which is a loop. And I've put Smack Attack on there, controlling the transients. Effect Rack, which is an Effect Rack preset that I've just flicked through. So this has got a Phase Mistress on it, a EQ, and some chorus. Sidechain and EQ, standard sort of processing for myself. So yeah, you can see how that one's got a bit more groove to it. It's a bit more repetitive, and there's few of those sounds are creating a bit of call and response within that loop. So this loop is one that I made. So it is a loop that I found from a sample pack. And then I've got repeating on the 16th notes by the looks of it. And then I've applied Tantra to create some random modulation using this preset up here. So if I just turn this off. So you can really tell how that's made quite a boring static loop, which just repeats on every 16th, into something modulated, a bit more random, and a bit textural that is going to sit well within this percussion groove. We then have a few sounds just from different packs that I've cut out. So we have this sound. So then all of these are starting to create a bit of call and response between each other. And then you can see when you combine this one as well. And you can even directly see on the grid how they are just playing one after another. So they're almost sounding like one loop, which is a massive thing when creating these glitchy textural percussion loops, is you want to make all your channels sound cohesive, and you want to pay attention to what the group sounds like as a whole, not just the individual channels. Because if we actually look at the arrangement quickly here, you can see that I've pretty much got every single glitch loop in here, besides one, from 16 bars in, which is about 30 seconds. So that means this track sounds really full, very interesting and dynamic from the get-go. So this is something that I preach and really recommend to do. So as I was just stating before I said that, these are just cut from samples, and I have probably done some pitching. So if you weren't aware, if you go to the pitch on Ableton and just play with the pitch, usually going up creates a more sort of glitchy effect. And you can hear how that one just changed the sound on there. So I will do a video on this probably next week on how to make interesting glitchy percussion. So you will see all my sort of techniques there. And then this is just a loop cut up. And this is another loop just cut up again. So all together you get this effect. And then with the drums, and because the drums are so simple, you can really let those glitch hits do a lot of work with the groove. And then low end. So you can really see how that's starting to come together now. All right, so let's jump in and have a look at the synths and effects and the textures before having a look at the vocals, because obviously the vocals are probably the most interesting part of this track. A lot of glitch work went into creating those. So the synths are really easy to break down on this one, because there's not that many. I've just used a reverse bass donk, which has come from one of my hardware. So this is pretty standard for all my tracks nowadays. It sounds super clean, sounds super nice, and it works really, really well with this deep tech minimal sound. Then we just have some acid. This came from my TB303. Don't really need to talk too much more about that. And then this is another bass hit from the Juno 106. Very short decay, which I've distorted and cut quite a lot of the low end out. So as you can see, these sounds are just used every now and again within the track just to keep it a bit more interesting and add a bit more depth to it. But as I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to add any crazy synths or any crazy new melody because I really wanted to keep it as close to that original track by Kylie Minogue as I could, or put my own spin on that original track as much as I could. So if we have a look at the effects, standard sort of stuff here. We have this modular effect, which I've pitched down -48, which creates a nice sort of deep dark effect when it rising up. Then we have a reverse kick, which it looks like I've stretched out slightly and then turn on Complex Pro so it keeps to its original pitch. And then we have this one over here, which is a drop effect, but it looks like I've reversed it, so then it creates a riser instead. And then I've pitched it up 26, which creates a more of a glitch sound. So if we just put this on 0 for comparison. So massive difference in the sound there, and all I've done is just pitch it up. I would really, really recommend utilizing this pitch function. It's just so easy to just put a spin on a sample and make it sound more unique. Then have another riser effect. And then we have this riser effect, which is white noise. We have this atmosphere, which I've just reversed and applied some delay to and some stereo savage to make it wider in the mix. And then just this textural loop. So there's nothing crazy going on there. This has just been added because this is where the track has the least amount of elements in. So if we just play it. So it just creates a bit more atmosphere in there. It's just very subtle, but like I said, we've stripped a lot of the sounds away, so you can get away with adding a bit more atmosphere or texture noises to help fill out the sounds that you've taken away. Then if we have a look at the textures, I've done nothing in here other than just drop and drag the loops. So you have this East End dub swan, and then the standard vinyl noise that I usually use. And on the bus, we have a stereo width plugin, an EQ, just cutting out the low end, saturation, and kickstart sidechaining it for on the floor pattern. So now we can take a look at the vocals, because this is probably the standout part of the track and probably the part that you want to know most about, as well as the arrangement probably, because there's some unique stuff I've done in there, which we'll go over in the second part of this video. So if we start with the chops, and I just play them, or just play them over here when they're in the groove. So this was actually really simple to make. All I did was I got the original acapella. I then put Effectrix on it. If you don't know what Effectrix is, it is a glitch plugin. So it just has a series of effects that you can add to it to create sort of glitch sounds. And then I just freezed and flattened it. And then this is what we're left with here, the freezed and flattened vocal with all the glitch hits on it. So that's how you can hear these little stutters in some of the vocal hits. And that's how the pitch is slightly altered as well, because there might have been a bit of pitch automation or manipulation within the audio channel before I freezed and flattened it. And then all I done was dragged, dropped it, put it onto a MIDI channel, turned the slice feature on, and I would have just jammed out on my Ableton Push and tried to play in a groove, getting all these little vocal chops playing off each other. I would have then done the same thing again with vocal chops 3. So this looks like it's a different audio channel. So maybe I changed a preset on the Effectrix on the original acapella. So then I had some slightly different variations. And it looks like I've done the same for vocal chop 2. And like I said, I would have just got all of these playing off each other. So it just creates its own unique rhythm, and they're all playing off each other without taking up too much space within the mix. So if we go down now to the main vocal parts, the main vocal parts are split up between the original and then the glitched versions. So if we look at this part here, so that's heavily glitched, and again this is using Effectrix, but all I done was just found some presets that I liked, recorded it into audio, and then chopped it up. So as you can see there, it's just all chopped up, and then that's how you create these weird glitched stuttered effects. Now something I see with a lot of the one-to-ones I do is a lot of my clients will make these really cool glitched vocals, which is great, but then they just leave it in the groove like this, and it will sound too weird, too modulated, and almost out of place. So what you want to do is, if you're using these glitch sounds, is you want to use them as a layer underneath the original. So it almost sounds like the original's disforming and glitching out and trying to break free, if you were like. So if we listen to how these two sound now with both of them stacked on top of each other, you can hear then how you still get the original, but you get these pops of glitches coming through. Now, that's just done by having the glitch one slightly louder than the original. You can see it's almost about 5 dB louder, which you can get away with volume, because that's what's going to create sort of dynamics in your track, is the difference in volume. And this glitch loop is less sustained, so less frequent compared to this one, so it can get away with being a bit louder. We can then have a look at the main vocal, which is the original acapella, which I've just chopped up and made that sort of little pattern out of. So I didn't want to just keep the original acapella in where it says this part before the drop like it does in the original track. I just wanted to try and chop it up and put my own spin on it. And then we can go into this part.
Boy, it's more than I dare to think about. I just can't get you out of my head.
Which we have sidechain, stereo savage, and beat repeat on. Now, beat repeat is a stock Ableton plugin, and it does what it says on the tin. It repeats the beat depending on where you set the intervals and how much you set it to. Now, this plugin can be a sort of lucky dip plugin, I find, as I would call it. You do just have to sit here, play with the parameters a little bit until you find something cool you like. Luckily, I came across this and it works really nicely. If I turn it off,
It's more than I dare to think about.
Just creates these subtle little stutters every now and again. There's plenty of videos on YouTube explaining how to do this, but personally, I would just sit there, play around with the parameters, and when you get something you like, just keep it like that. Same trick again with the glitched layer on top.
Can't get you out of my head. Boy, it's more than I dare to think about. Can't get you out of my head. It's more than a dance.
And this one has effectrix on it, so I can show you exactly what it's like. So we have the X loop here, which is its sort of own loop effect, which will create these stutters, delay, chorus, phasers, filters, crush, which is distortion, a stutter, tonal delay, vinyl, stretch, which stretches the sample out, reverse, reverses the sample, so on and so forth. And I often find the best way to use this plugin, again, like I just said with beat repeat, sit there, play around with the different parameters, put them in different places, and just have fun experimenting. And then when you get something you like, I would recommend freezing and flattening it, so then you can just experiment again, see if there's something you prefer or something you can add with variation. So then you have 2 glitch variations that you can have at the start of the track maybe, and then 1 at the end. Other than that, for the vocals, we have that part there, which is the same as this one over here, and then the main vocal again. And that is the track broken down. And there you go, that is another video all over and done with. I hope you got some good insights into this one on how you can manipulate samples, put your own spin on it, and hopefully help you make your next edit, which will absolutely slap. So join me soon and we will have a look at the arrangement for this track.